Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. We're so glad you're here. We're going to start with a land acknowledgement for the area where this program originates, the Pacific Northwest. This land acknowledgement was written by Eva Abram, one of our storytellers, in the Seattle Storytellers Guild, and many of you know Eva. She wrote this: "Our entire country consists of land that belonged to Native Americans. With this land acknowledgement, we respect, honor, and give thanks to the many groups of indigenous peoples and thank them for their care of the land, the animals, and the plants that provided sustenance. We specifically recognize and honor the Northwest groups whose land we occupy, some whose names we may have trouble pronouncing, and some names we are not familiar with today because those peoples have been extinguished. But we know and honor the Puyallup, the Cowlitz, the Clallam, the Muckleshoot, the Wishrum, the Suquamish, and the Duwamish. Thank you and all others for caring for the land, and thank you all for fighting today to continue to protect it." And with that said, I'm going to introduce you now to Joanna Demarest, our first teller for the evening. Joanna is a professional teller who, after traveling the country, settled here in Redmond. She is delighted to be part of the Seattle Storytellers Guild and this program. We are delighted as well right now to have her get the ball rolling with an original poem. Joanna, take it away.
Thank you, Anne. I'm very much an organic storyteller, and so I'm actually, forgive me, but I'm going to read part of this poem, because I think poetry needs to get the words just right. The Solstice. On the longest night of the year, the world holds its breath. The sun, weary from its long descent, pauses on the farthest edge of the sky, laying a thin wash of gold across the rim of the earth. The shadows stretch deep. The air grows still. Yet in this hush, something ancient begins to turn, for the winter solstice is a doorway, a quiet hinge between the darkness and returning light. It is the moment when the earth leans closest to night, only to remember that dawn is part of its nature. From this point forward, day by day, the light gathers its strength, small as a spark at first, and begins its long climb back towards spring. People have always known this, that even in the deepest dark, renewal waits. So candles are lit, fires kindled, stories shared to keep warmth in the bones. Evergreens stand like guardians of hope, their steady green whispering that life endures. The winter solstice reminds us that the year has a pulse, and so do we, that endings are thresholds and darkness is not an absence, but the fertile quiet where new light is born. Thank you.
Oh, Joanna, that was lovely. The images, I loved the quiet hinge idea. So many of my hinges are squeaky, but I love the quiet hinge. And turning towards the light. Thank you. Marty Falshore is our next teller. Marty grew up in the southern United States and says she never understood the solstices, even though she always honored them. But before moving to Washington State, solstices weren't a big thing for Marty. Now, I happened to hear the other day that sunset in Stockholm today was going to be at 2:47 p.m. So Marty, you're probably glad you don't live in Stockholm. Marty revels in telling tall tales, but right now she's pleased to share this Arctic story from Siberia. The title is How the Snowshoe Hare Rescued the Sun. Marty, it's up to you.
Thank you, Anne. And I have to say, I've always wanted to be above the Arctic Circle to experience the 24-hour of daylight and night, but that's never happened. So to get ready for this story, I read a whole lot of solstice stories, and what really, really surprised me is cultures along the equator even have solstice stories. Now, I looked it up, and there's like 5 minutes difference at the equator between one solstice and another, but yet they have solstice stories. I just found that very interesting. So this story is kind of a conglomeration of a whole bunch of northern stories, not the equatorial stories. So it was dark, really, really dark. No sun, no moon, no stars, and cold. The cold was just biting. When you inhaled, all you smelled was cold and dark. On your skin, all you could feel was the cold and the dark, or tasting the cold and the dark. Everyone was suffering. The only light was the northern lights, but those didn't offer much heat or photosynthesis, and they were unreliable anyway. What happened was demons had stolen the light, put it in a big wicker basket, and hidden it deep in the earth in their lair underneath the mountains far, far away. And these demons, let me tell you, these demons were just, how can I put this so it's not offensive? These demons were just demonic. There's no other word for it. Their heads were huge, the same size as their bodies, which were also kind of the same size as their spindly little legs. And their teeth, they had these sharp, shark-like teeth on the top and flat, sharp teeth on the bottom. And when they smiled, they kind of did this. They had these big bulbous noses and teeny tiny little eyes, big ears, and brown, thin hair covering their heads. But the most intriguing piece of these demons was their arms. Their arms were like T-Rex arms, but they could stretch them and stretch them and stretch them, and then they would spring back like a rubber band. So they would stretch and then spring back. And they had stolen the light. Snowy Owl thought it was time to get the animals together to figure out what to do, because since there was no light, nobody knew when to hunt, when to eat, when to sleep, when to be awake. The plants couldn't produce anything. The animals were starving. The plants were starving. So Snowy Owl gathered all the animals of the earth and the sky and the creatures of the sea, gathered them together in order to ask who will rescue the light. And they all started talking all at once. Nobody could hear what anybody was saying, and they just kept shouting different things until Snowy Owl said, "Stop! One at a time. We can't all talk at once." And they all stopped, and then somebody said, "Polar Bear. Let's send Polar Bear to rescue the light because he's strong and he can travel over the snow pretty well." And Snowy Owl thought about it and said, "Polar Bear. But Polar Bear will get hungry and stop to eat and forget to rescue the light." But Polar Bear said, "No, I won't do that. I can do it. I will go rescue the light." And off he galumphed south to go rescue the light. But he did find some late berries, and he stopped to eat all the berries, and it takes a lot of berries to fill a bear. And he stopped and forgot all about his mission to rescue the light. So Snowy Owl called all the animals of the land and the sky and the creatures of the sea together again to ask who will rescue the light. And they all started talking all at once, so nobody could hear what anybody was saying until Snowy Owl said, "Stop! We can't hear anybody, one at a time." And finally somebody said, "Let's send Wolf. Wolf is almost as fast as Bear, as Polar Bear, and he can rescue the light." And Snowy Owl thought about it and said, "But Wolf might get cold. It's really cold out there, and Wolf, while he's got good fur, might get really cold." But Wolf said, "Oh no, I will rescue the light." And off he trotted to south to go rescue the light from the demons deep in the earth, under the mountains far away. But Wolf indeed got pretty cold. It's cold out there, like I said. And he went looking for his fellows, howling away, and then all of them came together. Row, 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 row. They all came together and went and dug a little snow cave and curled up together and got warm and fell asleep. And he forgot his mission to rescue the light. So once again, Snowy Owl called all the animals of the earth and sky and the creatures of the sea together and said, who will rescue the light?" And nobody said anything because they didn't want to get yelled at again. And they sat there very quietly. And then this tiny voice said, "Snowshoe Hare. You can send Snowshoe Hare to rescue the light. He's really fast on the snow and won't get distracted by anything." And Snowshoe Owl thought about it and, Snowy Owl thought about it, and Snowshoe Hare ran up and said, Yep, send me, I can do it, I can do it." So Snowshoe Hare left off to the south to go rescue the light, and Snowshoe Hare went over the glaciers and through the valleys and over the mountains, and in one mountain, through a little crack, Snowshoe Hare saw a little light peeking through, and he knew that that was where the demon's lair was and where the light was. So he crept up to where that light was and listened, and all he heard was so he knew all the demons were asleep. And he went up to near where the light was, and he couldn't see a way in, so he went around to the left, couldn't see a way in, went around to the right, didn't see a way in, but there was this big boulder blocking a little hole in the mountainside. So Snowshoe Hare put his front feet on one rock and his strong hind feet on the boulder and kicked it away from the opening. And it went all the way down the hill. Snowshoe Hare froze, like only a prey animal can freeze, and listened, lest he woke up the demons. And all he heard was, so he knew the demons didn't wake up, and he crept in and got to the basket where there were little shards of light shining out through the weave of the basket. He went up to the basket and he couldn't help it. He just lifted the lid the tiniest bit, and all this light came out, and he slammed it down again. And again, froze, waiting to see what the demons were doing, but they were still snoring away. So he grabbed hold of the basket and started dragging it toward the opening, only it would along the floor. And the demons started, they started waking up. So Snowshoe Hare went faster with it and got through the opening and started hopping away. And with each hop, the basket would bounce and light would shoot through the weave and become stars in the sky. And he would hop along and light would shoot out, and the demons were coming after him, and they would shoot out their arms, grab his tail, but then his tail would just break off in their hands and they would snap right back. And they'd reach for him and grab his tail and snap right back. And Snowshoe Hare kept hopping as fast as he could, and the demons kept running after him and grabbing his tail and snapping back. And finally, Snowshoe Hare just decided to stop for a second, kick that basket high in the sky. And when he did, it opened, and one big piece of light became the sun, and a smaller piece became the moon, and all the other little pieces that shattered became the Milky Way, all the stars in the Milky Way. And the light blinded the demons, and they went running back into their lair. And Snowshoe Hare went hopping back home, where there was such a celebration of all the animals of the land and the sky and the creatures of the sea. They were all celebrating the return of the light with drink and food and singing and dancing. But that wasn't the end of the story, because the demons kept trying to steal the light again. And all the animals and the creatures would fight them. And finally, Snowy Owl, wise Snowy Owl, said, let's make a treaty. Let's make an agreement with the demons. They can have the light part of the year, but we get it the other part of the year. So to this day, every winter solstice, all the animals of the earth and sky and the creatures of the sea and the plants of the earth celebrate the return of the sun from the demons. And every summer solstice, they don't celebrate that the sun's going away. They celebrate that they managed to reach an agreement with the demons to let them have the sun for part of the year. And there's one more point. Remember, they were grabbing the rabbit's tail and it kept breaking off? I'm sorry, the hare's tail. But that's why rabbits and hares to this day have little tiny little tails. Thank you, and happy solstice to everyone. How Snowshoe Hare rescued the light.
Well done, Marty. Thank you so much. I love the images in that, especially the way the light comes out from the weave of the basket. That was just brilliant. Thank you.
Sorry, was that a pun?
Was
It was brilliant.
Oh, it wasn't meant to be. It wasn't meant to be, but if you think it is, it's okay. Yeah, you could credit me with making puns. Our next teller is Lilium Walsh. Lilium is a poet and a traditional teller who is new to our tent. She was spinning yarns even as a young girl, but only through her involvement with Under the Rainbow and with the Seattle Storytellers Guild in the last few years, have those yarns found a home. And we are so glad. Thank you, Lilium, for being here. Take it away.
Thank you. I have a personal story for you tonight. Um, I have a very large extended family. Um, my mother is the youngest of six, my dad's the oldest of four. I married into a family that's about the same size, and so our wedding had 150 relatives that were grandparents, cousins, aunts, uncles, people that I grew up knowing. And one of our, big values is to be around our family. And so we took over hosting Christmas. And last year we had all of our family members over for Christmas. And something too is that they absolutely love Yorkshire pudding. And I don't know if you're familiar with Yorkshire pudding, but basically you heat some fat up in a pan. And so it's boiling and you can fry things in it. And then you put batter in, like pancake batter or a cake batter. And you're baking and frying this batter at the same time in your oven. And the first couple of years that I made it, it kind of came out like a sad, undercooked omelet. But then we got it. We got the recipe, and Yorkshire pudding became one of my favorite recipes too. And so last year, we found a new recipe because everyone wants the Yorkshire pudding. And so we would make, like pie tin after pie tin of Yorkshire pudding. And there's only so many that you could fit in our oven. And so we found one that had little cupcake tins, so everyone could have their own Yorkshire pudding. And so my husband and I, we got the fat going in the cupcake tins, and then we, took them out and put the batter in, and you know, I wanted a little bit more, so I put a little bit more in, and I turned away because, we had 15 people over at our house. Like, we had a lot of family, and there's a lot of talking, and it's so nice to catch up with everyone, but it's a bit chaotic. And little did I know that my husband was also putting a little bit more batter in the tin. And so we put them in and we, start baking them, and everything's just about ready to come out and for us to sit down and eat. And then there's smoke happening. Things happen. We have some neighbors that have a wood fire stove. But then there is more smoke and more smoke. And we go and we check the oven, and we realize that there is a grease fire in our oven. And being a house full of family members who want to be helpful, we have the various uncles coming, and they because it's contained in the oven. But then one helpful uncle comes and he opens the oven and says, "Oh, that's a grease fire," and closes the oven. And so it flares back up. And then, we wait long enough and it kind of starts to, whatever. And so another uncle is like, "Oh, I'll be helpful." And, he has a thing of salt. And so he opens the thing again, and the grease fire flares back up, and he throws some salt in. It does nothing. And he closes the oven again. And we have a cousin that just moved to the area and lives on a boat, and he, was like a volunteer firefighter, and so he opens the oven and he says, "Yeah, that's a grease fire," and closes it. And so eventually, the smoke's going, and we're like, you know what, we're gonna call the fire department. So, we call 911, we say we have a grease fire, and the 911 operator is like, "Oh, okay." We do say that it's contained, and it's smoky, but we don't want to touch it because, like, we have a fire extinguisher, but as soon as, like, if I spray it wrong and it, like, comes out of the oven, then it's going to be in the kitchen instead of in the oven. And so, we call the fire department, and the 911 operator is like, "Okay, that's, pretty typical. Have you evacuated the house?" And my husband and I look at each other, as our 15 family members are talking and yelling and chatting and doing shots on the counter still and all this stuff, and we say no, but we'll do that. And so then, I think my husband calls out and says, "Okay, everybody out." So everybody, gathers things and goes outside, and so the 911 operator says, "Yeah, you fire department's on the way." And we're like, "Great, see you then." And then, because we have three cats, and my husband and I also have a teenager who is, very sensitive to loud noises, and so, the smoke alarms have been going off now for a while. And so, I have another cousin who's, helpful, and we have three cats, and so we managed to find all the cats. We chuck them each into a carrier, and the cats and my kiddo go outside into a car, and we just know that the house is empty and all the family is out on our front yard. And our neighbors had just sold their house. Their driveway is really big and empty, so everybody who had parked in our driveway backs up and goes off to, park their car across the street, and it's a whole thing. And fire department shows up and they come in, and then, all the aunts are like taking videos and pictures, and I have another uncle who apparently decided to bring a bottle of Jack Daniels outside because it's going to be cold and he wants to warm up, and so he's out there and he's just taking shots of whiskey on our lawn, and he's offering them to the other family members. And then I have a couple of aunts coming up, very concerned, and being like, "Oh, it'll be fine, it'll be fine, your house will be just fine." And I find out afterwards, because my husband goes in and deals with the fire department, and the fire department, they don't do anything in the oven. Apparently, they decided the best thing was to take this flaming tray of Yorkshire pudding, little pockets of grease, and take it out onto our backyard. And we have a teeny tiny concrete patio, and they put it down on that, and they literally took our hose and just sprayed it, and it did a big fireball. And thankfully, it was behind our house, so I didn't see that part because otherwise I probably would have started screaming. But, and the fire department, troops their way out, and, and everybody kind of calms down and all of this, and we all go back in, and we're all congratulating ourselves on, like, "Oh, we did so well in a crisis," and some of the stories come out, and, like one of them is that my aunt was, my kiddos has a favorite aunt, and so that aunt was with my kid in the car with the three cats who were all screaming. And our family also really loves Gewürztraminer wine. It's a white wine. We only like it in part because of the funny name. Um, and she quite literally had run out of the house with the bottle of wine and a glass of it, and was sitting in the car with my teenager. And so the firefighters are trooping back out, and she, called out, like, "Oh, how's the fire?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, it's good, it's good." And the first firefighter walked on, and the second firefighter was like, "Yeah, we took care of it." And then, because that favorite aunt is, she has a wine glass sticking out of the car window. And the firefighter is like, "You're not drinking and driving, no?" And she's like, "No, absolutely not." As she moves it into the car down below next to the center console with an entire full wine bottle. As the cats are screaming in, the background, and and the car is literally parked like on the other side of the street and hasn't entirely moved. And the firefighters are like, "Yeah, okay, whatever." And we all tromp in and we all share stories, and then, you know, everything's smelly, but it's fine. And everybody goes home. We have a great time. And then the next day we wake up and we smell, it was a fire. It was smelly. Whatever. Um, But then, my teenager and my husband get kind of like they just feel weird. And so they ended up uh we all ended up packing it just in case. We ended up packing a bag and calling the gas company because we have a gas stove. And and we had other family nearby, and so we're like, you know what, we'll just go for a visit. It'll be fine. My husband stayed and he had, met the gas man and was like, we're just being paranoid. It's fine. Like the fire department came out. It's whatever. And so the gas utility guy is, like, oh, okay, I'll go check it out. And, has his little monitor out and, it's like, yeah, it's fine, And then, he goes over to the stove, the oven, and it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. And then he sticks the probe behind the oven just in case, just on the off chance. And then he goes still. And he says to my husband, "Don't touch anything, but leave the house right now." And so my husband leaves the house. And the gas man very quickly leaves the house as well and goes and turns off the gas and all of this other stuff. And so then we find out that the fire department, when they trooped in, because they took the Yorkshire pudding and they put it out, and there's a big fireball, and then, they're trying to be helpful, and they were trying to like disconnect our stove and carry it outside so it'd air out, and they turned the gas off at the stove, but they couldn't quite disconnect it to actually carry out the stove, so then they just kind of moved it back, and it turns out that the valve was closed, but we had a pipe that came up, and right underneath that valve, there was just a little washer that came off a little bit, and we also had a drywall that had just a little crack in the bottom, and and so all the gas just went up there, and it went up between two studs all the way up to our roof. And my husband and I sleep along that wall over the kitchen. And so part of gas is that it's explosive between 4 and 14% by air. And by some miracle, we had made it to 15%, which meant that it was stable and non-explosive. Um, and I came home to several, little drywall cuts in the wall, and a very displeased gas utility man chewing out the fire department, saying that they really should have, called the gas company because that's a procedure, and how dare you, blah 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 blah. And he was very nice. He actually replaced our gas meter. There's all sorts of other things that happened as well, but that was our very exciting Christmas last year. And so this year we are not making Yorkshire pudding.
Oh, Lilium. Oh, that's a scary story. Oh, my word. How lucky you guys were. I mean, lucky and unlucky, and oh my gosh. Oh, yeah, no wonder you're not making Yorkshire put anymore. Oh my goodness.
We got
Oh
a
my,
very good family story out of it, though.
yes, yes, you really did. Oh, that's wonderful. I'm glad you're with us to tell the tale. Indeed, I am. We all are. Well, everybody, we are going to welcome Joanna back to the center stage here. Joanna is going to tell us an original story this time. This is called The Lantern of the Longest Night. Take it away, Joanna.
Thank you, Anne. Long ago, when the world was new and the seasons were just learning their rhythms, the sun was worried about winter. You see, as the days got shorter and shorter, the sun worried that the people would not welcome its return. And so what the sun would do is it would release one golden feather that would float down to the earth. And whoever found that feather was to keep a light burning all night long, so the sun would know it was time to come back. One year, that feather drifted down and landed on the snow outside of a small village. A young girl by the name of Marin picked up that feather. Marin was small, shy, and quiet, and often overlooked. But she picked it up, and it was warm in her hands. And she carried it into the elders, and they gasped, "It's the sun's feather. You must carry the Solstice lantern this night." Well, the Solstice lantern was very, very old. The frame was made out of the first branches from the first trees, and the glass, it was etched with lines that it looked like it was an ancient map. And the person who found the feather was to take it and place it in the lantern, and then they were to walk to the top of Frost Watch Hill and get there by sunrise. Marin looked down and she said, "Well, I'll go." Well, the village and the elders had really hoped to find a stronger, a braver child to take it, but the feather had chosen, and they could not go against tradition. So at dusk on that longest day, Marin took that feather and put it into the lantern, and it glowed. It wasn't a brilliant light. No, it was soft. It kind of felt like it remembered summer. And then Marin took that lantern and went to the forest that led to the Frost Watch Hill. As she walked along, lots of people had tried to do this before. Most of them got scared from the growling winter forest animals that were in that forest that led to the hill, or their courage was stolen by a cold, cold wind. But Marin took that lantern and she started to walk across the snow as it crunched upon her feet. She could see the shadows on either side of her, of whatever beasts were out there that was curious about this soft glow. At one point, a wolf came up beside her, its eyes like silver coins. She looked down. "I'll not harm you," she said. And the wolf looked up at the light and trotted away. Later, as she walked, a cold, cold wind spirit whipped up the wind like a smoke, but it was as cold as spilled stars. Marin, shaking, and the wind spirit turned to her and said, "You walk towards dawn. Turn around. This is night belongs to me." But Marin held up the lantern, and the lantern's glow pushed back the wind spirit so she could continue. By the time she came out of the forest and came to the edge of Frostwatch Hill, her legs were trembling. Her hands were so cold, they hurt. Her chest burned from the cold. The lantern, the light started to flicker and fade as Aaron's courage and strength started to fade. Marin looked at the lantern and said, "I am not strong, but I am here. And with that, she took a step and another, and soon she had made it to the top of Frostwatch Hill. And just as the whoosh light, streaks of gold went out from the lantern, and they reached all the way to the far side of the earth, to the darkest corner. And there the sun stirred. It was the signal. It was time for the sun to return to the people. The villagers then found Marin standing there, bathed in the golden light of dawn. In the lantern, all that remained was a curved shape of the curve of the feather that was made of ash. But from that moment on, the villagers did not overlook Marin. They realized that even the smallest among us can bring light into the darkest of times. And so now, every year on the longest night of the year, the children get lanterns and carry them up Frostwatch Hill. Some of them are strong and some are faint. But they're not to push back the darkness. No, they are to welcome home again the light and the sun. Thank you. Both the poem and the story have a very original how they came about. And it's a long thing, but if anyone's interested in finding out, we can talk about it at the end of the program. Thank you. Merry Christmas.
That was lovely, Joanna. I loved all the images, the golden feather in the lantern, the struggle of the little girl, and the dichotomy when you said her chest burned from the cold. That was an interesting play of words. And I loved the image that it was the light was cold as spilled stars. That was neat. Thank you. You have a way with words. Thanks so much. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to pause us just a moment here. I just want to be sure that you all know that while we don't have a physical hat to pass during these Zoom events, we are always welcome to donations to keep our storytelling alive. You can find a place to donate on our website, which is seattlestorytellers.org. And there's a donate button there if you feel like you would like to contribute to keeping our coffers filled so we can reimburse our tellers or pay our Zoom bills or whatever other bills we have to keep our organization running. Thank you. And now, away from the commercial, we go to Barry. Barry is, well, everybody knows Barry. I mean, everybody should know Barry. Barry is the stalwart. Barry is our Zoom tech person. He is our newsletter editor, creator. And for other, in other spheres, Barry is a grandpa, a retiree, a lay preacher, and a storyteller. Barry has told for many years, and he enjoys sharing traditional stories, especially the many customs and stories of this winter season. From biblical and literary Christmas tales, to legends of the saints, to folk tales from many countries, tonight he's going to share an Irish tale from one of his favorite authors. The author's name is Ruth Sawyer, and the tale is The Precious Herbs of Christmas. Barry, it's all yours.
Well, hello there. I do want to mention that since there's been interest in your poem, Joanna, I can include it with an email to everybody on our follow-up email, which will probably come out in a couple of days after I've had a chance to edit the video, but I'll do that. And I also hope my voice is okay because it's got a little bit of congestion in there and it might be a bit rough. His name was Good Lad. He had that name because the midwife, the wise woman from the lake, said when he was born, he looks like a good lad. And so they named him Good Lad. And he was a good lad, a sweet little boy. He lived with his father and his mother in a stone hut built into the mountainside of Binban, the White Mountain in Ireland. And back was against this rock. This gave it sturdiness. It had a strong chimney and a good hearth that drew real well. The walls were made out of stone to keep out the cold. The windows would let in the light from the south and the east, and it was a comfortable home. But just a few years after he was born, his father passed away and left him, a mere boy, the man of the house. Well, he and his mom lived there, and as he grew older, he began to take on various chores. He would fetch water, and he would get turf from the bog to burn in the fire, the hearth they used for cooking. They had a hook over the fire for a pot where they could boil food and cook porridge, and they had a griddle in which they could cook bread. And he would do those things, and as he got older, they had goats. Now, goats produce milk, and milk can be made into cheese, and his mother took the milk from the goats and sold the milk and sold the cheese to make a little bit of money, and then the rest was there for them to eat. And so they enjoyed time. And as he got a little bit older, he began to tend the goats. And by the time he was 7 or 8, his fingers were strong enough he could begin to milk the goats as well. And so he would do that. Now, there's one thing you got to realize about this lad, Good Lad, was he was afraid of the night. He was scared of the dark. And any time the sun went down, he would insist on the doors being closed and the windows drawn. He would insist that they light a candle, and he would sit close to the fire because he was afraid of the night. Now, his mom would say, "You don't need to be afraid of the night. The stars are but candles that God has lit." But no, he was scared of that night. And so, Good Lad, oh, excuse me, I almost forgot to tell you this. But he had learned how to blow a flute out of a reed that he made, and he used it to move his goats around. And so Good Lad was caring for the goats and helping his mother, and she would tell him stories at night around the fire about the fairy folk, the good people, the little wee fellows that live in the woods and the hills and the caves of Ireland, and they pop up at unusual times for unusual purposes. She would tell him stories about the times they helped the cobbler with his shoes, and he made many shoes over one night's stand because all those little folks were hammering away with their red caps. She would tell him stories about the pots of gold that would appear and suddenly disappear. And she'd also tell him stories about the fact that at Christmas time, the little people would come out and do good things for folks. Well, a lot of people thought the wee men, the leprechauns, the elves, whatever you want to call them, were nothing but mischief. But he didn't think so. He thought they were good people. And so at night, oftentimes, he would put out a bowl of oatmeal left over from his meal, a piece of cheese, maybe a little wooden cup of milk for them to eat. And in the morning it would be gone, and he would be very excited because, look, they must be true, because they ate. They ate the porridge and they ate the milk. Well, midsummer came along, and he was tending his goats, and he was playing his flute and sitting under a tree, and after a while he realized he couldn't see any goats anywhere. So he went looking for him, and he was wandering around up on the slopes of Binban, that white mountain, and he heard this whimpering noise. And he looked around, and he followed the noise, and he came upon this crack in the rock. And he looked down, and down in that crack there was a wee little man. A wee little man, and he was trying to claw his way out of the crack, but he couldn't do it. He was stuck in that crack. The poor little guy. And Good Lad, he has a gentle heart. He says, I will help you. And he reached down, and the wee man took hold of his hand, and he pulled him up and set him there. And there he was in a ragged coat, with a face that was rough like the bark of a cedar tree, and his hat was all askew, a little red hat. And he straightened out his hat, and he brushed the dirt off of him, and the little wee man said to him, "Well, what do you want for your wish?" "Wish? What's this about a wish?" "Well, any time you humans help us out, you expect us to give you a wish." "Well, I don't have a wish." "Why, I don't need anything. I don't need a wish." "You're sure now? You're going to miss out." "No, I don't need anything. I helped you out, and that's just fine." "Well, you're going to wish you had made a wish. But I'll tell you what, I give you the promise of a wish." And he disappeared. Well, about that time, he heard the tinkle of the bell on Star, the lead goat, as she was leading the flock back home. It was getting near milking time, and goats have to be milked twice a day, which is a lot of work for a wee lad, like good lad. And so he took the goats home, and that night, after it began to get dark, and he closed all the curtains, and he shut the door and barred it, and lit the candle and sat by the fire, he had the story about the little folks that night. He told about the wee man he pulled out of the rock, and about the wish, and his mother kind of just enjoyed the story, but thought he was kind of making this up. Well, life went on, and they took care of the goats, and summer became fall, and fall began to come winter, and when the sharp winds of winter came, his mother fell ill. She wasn't feeling well at all. She began to lose her appetite. She just wanted to lay there on the bed. Her color was terrible. She was getting paler. She was losing weight. He tried to feed her soup and tea and other things, but she just didn't have any appetite. And after a while, she hardly recognized who he was. And he worried about it. He worked hard. He did his chores. He fetched the water and the turf and took care of the goats. And it was hard because he did not have her help to do that. But she just kept getting sicker and sicker. So finally, he went down to the wise woman at the lake to ask her what to do. And she asked him. He told her, and she said, "This doesn't sound good. I think she's really sick, and I don't know what to say, but I do know of one thing. The old folks said, and they were a lot older than me, that if you get the 7 precious herbs at the night of Solstice with snow on them, and make a tea, it will help. But you have to have the snow on them, and it has to be the 7 precious herbs of Christmas. And it all has to be done in the dark of the moon while the sun has not yet come up." Well, he said, "How do you find these 7 herbs? What are they?" "They're the 7 precious herbs of Christmas." "Well, I can't do that. That's going out in the dark. It's scary out there. I'm afraid of the dark. I don't want to go." "Listen, you can't be afraid. Love overcomes fear, and if you love your mother, you'll have to help her with this." Well, he realized it was getting late, and he had to go back up the hill and milk the goats, and he went up there, and he thought about this, and as the days went on and it got darker and darker, he realized that, one thing I didn't mention, that snow has to be the first snow that falls. And it hasn't snowed. It hasn't snowed yet. The clouds come, and it looks like it's going to snow, but it hasn't done it yet. And so he began to pray, God, bring the snow. Help me find those herbs. Give me courage to go out in the dark. Well, finally he realized she was just getting on the borderline of passing on. And it was the night of Solstice. And he decided he had to go. So he lit a candle and put it in the window, and he bundled himself up, and he got a basket, and he went out, And he figured, well, I'll take the goats with me for company. And so he opened up the pen and let the goats out. And Star, the lead goat, came out, and the other goats followed. And she started walking up the hill like she knew exactly where she needed to go. And he could hear the bell, and he could see the white on her back and on her tail, and it helped guide him through the dark. And they worked their way slowly up and up the hill, and he'd never been that high up on the hill before. But the goats seemed to know where they were going, and all of a sudden, as they reached the edge of the hill, looking out over a valley, a meadow, a little meadow, the goats all of a sudden just sat down and looked. And he looked down into the meadow, and there was these little lights coming out of the woods, and they were gathering in the meadow, and there were lots of them, and they twinkled. It was pretty soon the meadow looked like the sky with the stars full of it, but the sky was full of clouds, and it started to snow. And he watched, and the lights moved around, and slowly they came closer and closer to the bottom of the hill, and he heard a voice. "Well, boys, you know why we're here, don't you?" "Yes, sir, we are here to grant a wish to a mortal." "And what kind of wish would that be?" "Well, this is a wish that is unspoken, but heavy on the heart." "And just exactly what is that wish?" "Oh, you told us he wants to find the 7 herbs of Christmas, and they have to have snow on them, and we have to mark them for him so he can find them." "You got it right, boys. Now let's get busy and let's have our party." And they started to dance around, and slowly they formed a big ring around the meadow, and they were weaving in and out, and they were singing and chanting, and periodically one of them would run out with a reed light and poke it next to a bush and run back and join the singing, and they went on and went on. Pretty soon there were 7 of those reed lights burning by various shrubs and bushes in that meadow, and all of a sudden there was a gust of wind that whirled, and they were gone. Now, old Goodlad was watching all this and just wondering. Never seen anything like this. This is nothing his mother ever told him about. Well, the goats, they got up and they headed down the hill into the meadow, and he followed with them, and he had his basket, and he went to each one of those bushes and shrubs that was lit by the light, and he broke off a branch very gently and carefully, because by now it was snowing hard, and there was snow on the branches, and he laid them in his basket. One by one, each of the shrubs that was lit up, all 7, he picked something and put it in the basket. And then he said, "Star, goats, we need to go home. It's getting cold out here, and it's still dark." Well, Star led the way. She just started like she knew her way down the mountain, and the other goats followed, and Goodlad followed after them, and followed that jingling bell and that white tail. And then finally he saw the candle in the window, and he went and opened up the door and set his basket down, closed up the door, closed the curtains. Then he got some turf, and he put it on the fire, and he heated up real good, and he got the teapot, and he went over to the basket, and he broke off twigs and little bits, all with the snow on them, and he threw them in the pot. All 7 of the branches that he had picked, he picked pieces off, he put them in the pot, he brewed it. Pretty soon it was boiling, and the smell was wonderful. A tremendous aroma was filling the room, and he poured out a cup of tea and made sure it wasn't too hot, and he took it over to his mother, and he gave it to her. She took a sip or two. Her eyes started to light up. She took another sip or two, and she recognized him. Good lad, what have you got?" "Mother, you must drink this, you must drink this." She drank some more, and the color returned to her cheeks, and she smiled at him, and then her eyes got heavy, and she lay back and she slept. Well, good lad spent the day giving her sips of tea, and she got her appetite back, and it was very clear by the end of that day that she was well on the road to recovery, and he thought he better go check those herbs out to see what those precious herbs were. And he went to his basket, he looked, and chamomile, pennyroyal. Many times I've picked those with Mom. Reached out, heal all. Well, that's a very common herb, and here's rue, and look at this, tansy. Tansy, that's just a common herb. And thyme. All 7 of the herbs were just common herbs that they used to pick all the time and use in their food. And he wondered, how can it be that these things became such a miracle cure for his mother in her illness? Well, he figured that he would ask the wise woman at the lake, or his mom when she got better, and maybe they could explain this to him. But then he went to the door of the hut, and he opened it wide, and he walked out into the night, and he looked up at the sky, filled with those twinkling candle lights the Lord God had lit. He thought back about that meadow with the lights like a starry sky, and he realized there was nothing to be afraid of the dark. His love for his mother had overcome his fear, and he was no longer a lad. He was now the man of the house. Thank you.
Oh, Barry, I love a magical story, and this had plenty of magic in it. Oh my. Imagine just ordinary herbs being able to cure one's mama. Wow, that is great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Hey, everybody, I have put in the chat information if you choose to give us a donation. That would be wonderful. Well, we have reached the final performance of the evening. Let me see if I can change my view here. I don't like looking at myself. There we go. We welcome as our final teller this evening, Walter Wilson, who is coming to us. He's come all the way from the Sacramento area of California to tell for us this evening. Oh, the wonders of Zoom. Walter is another new member under our tent. He is a frequent listener and a teller at our Fourth Monday Little Liars group, which Marty organizes, and it will be the fourth Monday this Monday, I believe. If Marty, is it the fourth Monday this Monday?
Yep.
Yeah.
We're having it this Monday.
Marty, maybe you can put in the chat the link so that people can join the Little Liars group on Monday.
Try to find it.
That would be
Okay.
great. And
Sure.
Walter also has visited our first Friday story swaps, and always a pleasure to have him listening and telling. He asked me about this evening. He said he's going to keep me in the dark about the title of his tale this evening, so I'm not sure what it's going to be, but be assured that we are in for a sweet surprise. Please, everybody, welcome Walter Wilson.
'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even Annie's mice. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas would soon be there. You children were all snug in your beds, while visions of Christmas goodies danced in your heads. Mary Ann in her kerchief and Barry in his cap had settled down for a long winter's nap. When out on the lawn there rose such a clatter, Barry sprang from his bed to see what was the matter. Away to the window he flew like the flash. He tore open the window. Barry, you threw up the sash? The breast of the moon on a new fallen snow gave a midday lustre to the objects below. And what should your wondering eyes see but a miniature sleigh with 8 tiny reindeer, a little old elf so lively and quick, you all knew in a moment it must be Saint Nick. More swifter than eagles his coursers they came. He whistled and he shouted, and he called them by name. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Donner and Vixen, on Comet, on Cupid, on Donner and Blixen. To the top of the porch, to the top of the wall, dash away all. As dried leaves before the wild hurricane fly, they meet an obstacle and mount to the sky. To the rooftop his coursers they came, with a sleigh full of toys, and oh, St. Nicholas too. And then in a twinkling you heard on your roof the pawing and prancing of each little hoof. Mary Ann and Barry drew in their hands, turning around. Down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound. He was dressed in fur from his head to his foot. His clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. A bundle of toys he had flung on his back. He looked like a peddler just opening his pack. Oh, how his eyes twinkled, his dimples how merry. His cheeks were like roses, a nose like a cherry. The droll of his mouth was drawn on up like a bow. The beard of his chin was as white as snow. He had a broad face and a little round belly that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. He was a jolly and plump old elf, and you all laughed when you saw him in spite of yourselves. With a wink of his eye and a twist of his head, soon gave you all you had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word and went straight to his work. He filled all the stockings and turned with a jerk. Giving a nod to Mary Ann and Barry, laying a finger aside of his nose, up the chimney he rose. He sprang to his sleigh, and to his team he gave a whistle. They all flew away like the dawn of a thistle. Oh, my friends, we heard him exclaim as he drove out of sight. Merry Christmas to all, and to all good night.
Thank you, Walter. Well done. And thank you for to Barry and to Marianne for playing a role in this story.
What about your mice?
Oh, the
Annie's
mice.
mice.
The mice, yes, indeed. Oh, the little mice. Yeah. I have a story that I used to tell about the little mice. Maybe that's why you're bringing it up, Walter. I do have a story that I tell about the mice who were insulted that the line is not a creature was stirring, when indeed they were stirring in the house. Alrighty then, friends.
Thank everybody as well. And Joanna, I'd love to hear your backstory for your poem and your story if you want to share.
Sure. This may cause a controversy, but here we go. So as I was preparing for this, I went to go see, I have this whole bookcases behind me full of books, and I did not have a Solstice story. And I started looking on the internet. I started thinking, well, I got to go to the library. And I thought, I wonder. Recently, while we were doing the search for the in-person venue, I had to fill out a large number of applications. And I kept getting down to, well, how does this performance relate to our mission statement? And I'd be like, oh man, all right. And I'd start typing and trying to do it again. And all of a sudden I remembered, like, my husband uses Chatgpt all the time. So I went and I asked, how does this performance relate to this mission statement? And it gave me this wonderful answer. And I was like, cool. And I got all of these applications done. And luckily, all 4 of the ones that I applied to all said they want us. But after a while, I was sitting there, I kept thinking about that Solstice story. And I thought, I wonder, would AI create a story for me? And I thought, so I just went in and I said, I would like a Solstice story. And it created that story. And I had this real hard, I started learning it, but I kept going, I wonder if I should tell it, because it's AI. And I had, when I got the story, I started asking questions. It was like, is this story copyrighted? And it replied to me, no, this story was created for you. You can do whatever you want with it. And I said, well, where did the story come from? And it said, it's based on many legends, one of which comes from Sweden. I thought, oh my gosh. When we were traveling in the RV for 7 years, we spent 4 winters in Central Florida. And I work camped at a living history museum. And normally during most of the time that we were down there, we did school programs for kids, teaching them about life on the frontier in Florida in the 1900s. But during the month of December, we changed the program to what was called Traditions. And the kids went around from station to station learning where our traditions, our Christmas traditions came from. Poinsettias come from Mexico. Christmas cards from England. So they had a little passport and they went country to country. Well, one of the countries was Sweden. And in Sweden, on December 13th, they celebrate St. Lucia Day. And St. Lucia's story is, I see Sarah's nodding, she probably knows the story, is that there was a young girl in the year 304 who got martyred. But at that time, the Romans were persecuting the Christians, and the Christians were hiding out in the catacombs. And so this one young girl wanted to bring them food, but she wanted to carry as much food as she could. So she made a wreath, put candles in it, and put it on her head. And then she could take armloads full of food down to the people. Well, as I did this program, I would put on this white robe with a red sash, and we had a wreath that I put on my head that had candles in it. We did not light them. They were, little candles. And it was at our candle dipping station, this is the connection between where we got candles to celebrate bringing light back. We didn't talk about Saturnalia or any of that, but it did have that. So I'm sitting here looking at this story, and I'm like, this is the story of the young girl bringing light into darkness. And so I had a connection to it that AI maybe figured out some way that I had a connection to that. And so I really debated. I'm like, well, maybe I really shouldn't tell this verbatim, essentially, because I did not go and look for another story to go with it, to merge stories together as we should do as storytellers when we have that. And I thought, I wonder how storytellers are going to feel about AI created stories, because that is taking our creativity away from, us. A lot of people are really worried about it. So interestingly, NSN Yes Group, the Youth and Educator Storytelling Alliance, is part of NSN, and I'm a member of that. And they just recently had a workshop done by Ryan McPherson. When I send out the poem, which was also created by AI, when I send that out, I'll send the link to this workshop that I attended. And it was storytelling and AI and bringing it together. And the great people, Alton Chung was on it. There were all kinds of people that were in this workshop. And I turned to them at one point after we started talking about, and I said, well, I've used the AI to help create the applications, and like, that's great for that. All that drudge work we have to do, AI is great for it. And I said, after we talked about that, I said, well, I created a story and I got this event coming up and I'm thinking about doing it for the event. What do you think about that? And they were all like, well, if you make it your own, if you change it enough to make it yours. And by that time, I was so far into learning the story that I thought, you know what? I think this one time only, I'm going to tell it straight as the AI created it. And so I will send it out to you, but know that that's where it came from. That's where its origin is from. I can call it an original story because AI told me I could say it was my story. And I have to tell you, Chatgpt has become my new best friend for doing drudge work, creating all of that stuff that sometimes we have to create. But I certainly probably will never, I felt uncomfortable enough about telling the story straight AI that I'll never do it again. But I thought it was an interesting experiment. I didn't want to say how it was created until I heard your responses to it, or I watched your responses to it to see how you responded to an AI story. But welcome to the 21st century and what it's possible to do. So that's where it came from.
Thank you for that explanation, Joanna.
I just added a link.
I had some of the same feelings. I wrote a story last year with the help of AI, and I ended up not telling it because it didn't feel authentic to me. It wasn't mine. And even though it was made for me, it didn't feel like it was mine to tell. Right. So I understand the struggle there.
Well, and people like Alton Chung and them were saying to me, and Ryan and Kevin Cordy was running the call, and they were saying, it's okay to take your story and put it into AI and give it a prompt with, can you make this more for children? Can you make this more for adults? And get those ideas, not take it verbatim like I just did it. Or as much, I'm pretty organic in my telling, so it wasn't verbatim, but it was really close. But if you take that and you shape it and form it into you, or the other thing they said is if you give AI enough of your stories in your voice, then the AI will start creating stories in your voice, which is kind of weird feeling. But yeah, Vera, you started to say something?
Oh yeah, I put a link in the chat to a page I have about Lucia of Syracuse and the legends of that. And I also put a link in there to my page of Christmas related links. So if you want to look in the chat, you can find those two things.
Yeah, one thing I did, like I said when I was introducing my story, is I read a lot of Solstice stories. And while I consider the one I told to be mostly from Siberia, like the basket was not in the Siberian story. It was a bag, I think, if I remember right. I forget what else I stole from other stories, but they were all kind of Arctic stories, just because I couldn't connect to the Hawaiian, and I can't think of the other islands that had their own solstice stories.
I did a lot of digging around looking for Solstice stories, and if you look at the newsletter, the first page has an article about Solstice and stories, and I allude in there to quite a few of them. It's interesting because when you go on Google for Solstice stories, you don't really come up with anything, surprisingly enough. But if you start following the links on the various winter goddesses and so on and so forth, then you start to find a lot of stories. But
Yeah.
yeah, so you might look at that little article, and that might give you some ideas as well.
Yeah. My problem was I was so involved in the venue search, and I was like, I don't have time. I didn't feel I had time to do all the research to find the story. And that's
Yeah.
why
Right.
I cheated a bit and just thought,
Yeah.
well, maybe I'll experiment and see what happens.
Well, let me say this, that we're very excited because Joanna has found us a very nice venue in downtown Seattle, right close to the Art Museum. Um, and it's a free location. And we're going to be looking into that, and we hope probably in the next few months to start having some storytelling events, live storytelling events for those people in the Seattle area at that location. So thank you, Joanna, for all
which
that hard work.
But they'll
which
be
will be hybrid.
right?
They will be hybrid. They have Wi-Fi there that we will be able to connect and do Wi-Fi. We'll have to work at getting cameras set up and that kind of thing, but that is going to be possible. So we're having our board meeting. We're actually going to do our board meeting instead of by Zoom. We're going to have it at the location on January 6th, so the board members can see it. And I do have to give Judith Alexander credit because she was the one that went to this venue for an event that she went to. It was a musical event that she went to, and she emailed me immediately because I was already deep into the search, and we had the Swedish Club and the Folio and all these other ones that we were looking at, as well as Hugo House. And so Judith really gets the credit for finding it. I just investigated it.
Yeah.
Well, we do
So,
want to thank
just
everybody that's,
thank you, everybody, for coming.
yes, thank you all for coming. I know some people have skipped out already. I will be editing the recording down a little bit, cutting out all this chatter at the end and some other things. But I will be sending out a link probably sometime next week with that. If you want to visit some of our previous StoryFests, if you go to our YouTube channel, just search for YouTube, Seattle Storytellers Guild, and you can watch quite a few programs we've had in the past. But we do want to thank everybody for taking the time of coming tonight and enjoying our stories. And I do hope that you have a very pleasant holiday, whether it's Hanukkah or whether it's Christmas or whether it's Kwanzaa or whether it's Ramadan or if
Or
it
solstice.
just happens to be Solstice. May you have a merry one.
Thank you, everybody. It was a lovely.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Thank you.
Holidays. Good night.